I am a nameless voice. Hear me from the other side and understand my calling. I have been forgotten. To be forgotten is not an idle torment. The place I am now is like a purgatory. My soul has traveled on, but my memory lingers. I am the shadow cast by the consequences of my own actions. In this place I exist, as long as there is someone to remember me. As long as there is someone to make offerings to the ancestors, I continue. Maybe I only exist in name, but when the proper rituals are performed, I am given life again. And as long as my name, my image, survives in some form in the world, so will my shadow here. But when your name is neglected, when the offerings are not left before your shrine or the shrine of your family, your soul begins to degrade. When the monuments from your kingdom crumble, your awareness is close to being snuffed out like a light, like being held under the torrent of a raging river, where the current batters you senseless within an inch of annihilation. But there are other ways to talk about time. I was not always a wandering, hungry ghost. Once, I was a woman. Like you, I slept, ate, walked, talked, cried, loved. I did not aspire to much. There was a time when all I wanted to be was a good wife, and I was willing to go to any end to fulfill that station, to do my duty. But that simple position in the world was not my fate. In the end, I found myself with an entire kingdom at my disposal. In the end, I, an ordinary woman, found an entire kingdom as my responsibility. I do not think anyone understood how these events came to pass, even at the time. The turmoil that we faced, the destruction of everything we knew, and the chaos within and without our nation left us all nearly numb. Equally extraordinary were the great deeds done by those who rose to the occasion. I will tell you, I stood as silent witness to these deeds at the eye of the storm. I was the nursemaid of these actions, and I held them in their deepest despair, in the silent, sobbing pangs of the night. And I do not understand them. I cannot understand them. Where to begin? I was the wife to a prophet. As any woman in my position knows, being wife to a prophet is one of the worst things that can happen to anyone. It is hard. Yes, there are the sleepless nights, and there is the turmoil. But there is also the need to be unquestioning, because there is never time to question. So there is the blind faith, which becomes synonymous with our love. Then there are the social functions, but the constant stress becomes rather automatic after a while. But the worst are the silent burdens that you must bear as caretaker, mother, and handmaiden to a new epoch. These burdens are never named, never spoken of, never seen, and you must take them, nurture them as your own. Because who would you be if you did not? What would any of us be? Do not expect any thanks. In your era, they call my prophet Imhotep. He was many things to many people. To me, he was a good man. I never felt that I deserved any of this. He saw something in me that I could never see in myself. I never understood why he chose me. His vision extended so far to the future. I sometimes wonder if he saw where we are now. He supported me in a way no husband would ever do, except the most extraordinary. He believed in me, and he broke the most dangerous laws for me, for our whole family. Few men have ever believed in a woman the way he believed in me. He saw fit for me to be given instruction in education. You will remember him as the designer of the first pyramid, the architect who changed the world. Yes, he was this, but in our times he was so much more. We did not even understand the pyramid until after it happened. We were just trying to stay afloat. Imhotep was revered by the people as a man who performed miracles. In the face of the catastrophes, the chaos and famine, as a healer, he shone like a light. His divinity became so self-evident that eventually they had to recognize him. The king had to summon him to the court, a man whose position in the priesthood and among the people had already reached unheard of fame. Let me be clear, we were commoners, we were not nobility. My husband came from a long line of architects, and my father was a merchant. We were both from the suburbs of the city you Greeks call Memphis, but which we named for the beauty of its white walls, Imbuhej. I was common as muck. I had no sense of import, and only thought to support my husband as he took on a role in the priesthood. I knew he was extraordinary and would do great things, but I did not know it would go this far. I did not realize when we moved that I would never be able to return to our home village. How could I have known? Commoners did not aspire to a higher standing in our society. We knew our role in life. Of course, I was ambitious, and I knew what we were capable of. My husband was educated, and I knew that we deserved the best that we could get out of life. And I was an accomplished magician myself. I was a sorceress. Men and women knew the power of my speech, of my gaze. But there was not much respect for a mousy girl from the suburbs in those early days, when my husband was just beginning his work and his ascension. It was not the same by the end. We rose to heights unheard of, before or since. What happened to us happened only once in the entire history of the kingdom, and it was beyond our petty human wills, or at least mine. The king named Imhotep to be the regent of all of Egypt. The office of regent means that one is in charge of every practical affair in the entire country. In essence, the regent runs the country, while the king maintains his symbolic function. Why did he do this? Understand that the king would never name any commoner to this position, ever. That is the extent of how extraordinary the events had become. Imhotep was a man in the process of becoming a god. He was on the path of the holy sage. He had just single-handedly saved the country from a famine, and the people worshipped the ground he walked upon. They had no choice but to recognize him. It was self-evident that he was divine. How could they not? They named him as equal to the king. In short, He was held to be as divine as the king. Perhaps he was more divine, but everyone knew no one could commit that blasphemy. The outer form is different from the inner truth. And I was named chief handmaiden of the Queen's ladies in waiting. This was also a very important job, but it was largely a silent position of holding things together for others. The court of the king was very complicated. I was very much in over my head. In a sense, I think we all were. We were not prepared for the brutal games of the nobles. In the court, everyone holds multiple titles, and the complex interlinking of officials and courtesans means that it is very easy to inadvertently tread on someone's toes. There was a great deal of balancing one needed to do between many different interests. One way we handled it was by keeping secrets. We did not really know who we could trust. We were better educated than some of the nobles, but it was not easy for us to move in those circles, especially when some forces would rather we never stood in those shoes. There were plenty who would have liked to see us publicly discredited and his divinity disgraced. So we fell back onto the one group we knew we could trust: family. The bonds of blood are not easily broken. It was our family that took on most of the positions necessary. And as the chaos and near rebellion increased, those of us who were able stepped up to the occasion. This is one of the reasons why Imhotep had me learn hieroglyphs, a forbidden art for a woman to learn at that time. I needed to be able to read and write, so I could manage and notarize the documents we had to go through. And our family was running a country. There were never-ending rolls of documents we had to handle. So my brother-in-law taught me in secret. They never found out. I had great fun when I went to the market and was able to read the tallying marks of the scribes. I never gave them enough so that they knew for sure I could read and write. I always played it dumb. Sooner or later, every scribe knew or suspected, and they learned to fear me. But they could never say for sure, and none would dare accuse me. With that, and my mastery of the magical arts, the people knew I was a force to be reckoned with, a warrior goddess of great esteem and fire, who slew with her gaze. Knowing the sacred symbols changes you. You see deeper into the true nature of things. Your magic deepens too. You are able to see the meaning behind the words, and the hidden relations between all that is. He made me feel like a little girl. I was secretary to all his schemes. I felt like he was inscribing something within me, as if I were the scribal tablet and he were the stylus. I did not feel as though I understood what the message was I was meant to bear, or how to bear it. I am still unsure now. In the midst of these great events, we began to build the funeral monument for Zoser. There was no plan. We never meant to build a pyramid. Pyramids did not exist yet. We did not know what we were inventing. All we knew was that these were crazy times, and that this monument had to be greater than any before it. At first, we were building a simple mud brick tomb. It became more. But the only thing that is still standing is a pyramid. That is the memory. 1,000 tons of stone thrusting into the sky. The pyramid is nothing. The pyramid is just a husk. The pyramid is only the bones of memory. What use is the pyramid if there is no one there to worship it? What use are the altars of the ancestors if no one leaves them offerings? Let me tell you what his invention means. The first innovation he made was that there should not just be a tomb where some offerings were laid once in a while. No, it was more than a tomb. It was a living temple, where the people were meant to go and make offerings well after the king was laid to rest. It was a marketplace, a forum, a place of life. It was no empty necropolis. And yes, sacrifices to the departed were also to be offered there. They would watch over us. He had the vision of what it would be as we were building it. He fulfilled the fate of his family as a long line of architects through this vision. It was not just the king who ascended on this stairway. Imhotep built it too. It was his offering. He had the vision, divinely inspired, without warning, to put another square tomb on top of the first one, and then another. The poor workmen had no idea what was going on. There was a lot of grumbling, and I often had to be there as a maternal figure to wipe noses and settle everyone's disputes. Imhotep was a man with a vision. He did not have time to pick up all the pieces. He was building a stairway to the stars. The workmen were not going to the stars. They needed bread. Although, to his credit, in his off hours he was figuring out how the rest of the kingdom would eat too. He arranged mastaba on top of mastaba until the form of the monument became a perfectly shaped stairway to heaven. It was a ladder that the king's soul was meant to climb. It was a place of ascendance. In climbing that ladder, the death of the king was a sacrifice to link earth and heaven. He never set out to make that form. It was the consequence of all our lives, all our journeys together. In the complex, he created columns modeled after bundled reeds of papyrus. These are the columns you Greeks stole when you later went to make your temples. King Dzoser's monument was a microcosm of the other world. It was that world brought down here to earth for the people to partake of. It was open to all. But the rites for the funeral of the king were closed, though there were many mourners. And it was this ritual which made the link between heaven and earth. The king had died for his people. In mourning, the people's sins were redeemed. It was a staircase to the stars. It was a way Imhotep showed to the world. And when he died, he took that stairway in his ascendance. From being in the presence of that, I ascended a bit too. In my passage through the afterlife, I, like many others I knew, followed this path to heaven. But it is different being in heaven on someone else's debt, my husband's. Although I stayed in that place for an eon of the world, eventually I returned to Earth again. I failed a test and returned. I could not yet own my fate. The world of Imhotep's vision was the background noise, the world of dream we returned to from our waking hours, our trials and tribulations, the world of the gods. But in the daylight world, we had many dangers to overcome. To be honest, I do not think I would have survived the court were it not for the queen. She took me under her wing, mentored me in the proper manners and rites, and taught me, above all, how to prevail against others who countered my will. She was like an elder sister to me. She took care of me, and I was endlessly devoted to her. We understood each other in the way of bosom friends. To her, I was not just a functionary, and I was put in the unenviable position of having to manage all of the handmaidens, when all of them wanted my head for getting the top office for nothing. There was hysteria. There were underhanded plots. But with the queen's gentle tutoring, and I should add, her protection, I learned within a few years to master my position. I put down my enemies, it is true, but I never overstepped my bounds. And the role of chief lady-in-waiting mirrors the regent. You are the one who everyone in the court comes to, informally, when something goes wrong. You are the one who must handle all of their problems, their woes, their disputes, the ones that they cannot air in the public arena. And above all, you are their caretaker, their counselor, their friend, the bearer of their burdens. The silence of these burdens has nearly overcome me. When I took up the position, I was looked down upon as an upstart. Yes, it is true. But later, when I had proved myself, my relations with the girls changed. They became my compatriots, my closest friends. There are secrets women keep, like those passed from mother to daughter, which never touch the light of day. Laugh if you want to, but there was a power to what we did. Our way of praising God was different than the men's, and we had a separate society from them. This was a way we had of preserving our power, as much as, in similar situations, they knew they must preserve theirs. And both men and women knew the consequences if they transgressed. That's how it was in the old world. There was respect, and with it, dignity. When I trusted them later, some of the girls learned to write in addition to me. They became the recorders of my visions, who would write my dreams after I incubated in the temple of the goddess. I kept the ones I could trust close, and my secret visions closer. I was close with the queen in a way I could never be close with my mother-in-law. I always felt like a fly on the wall, inferior between her and Imhotep. They had a very tight bond. I felt as though I were an appendix, just some baggage that happened to be carried through. In the beginning, when we all lived together, it was quite hard for me. I did not feel that I had any role or purpose to be there. I did not have a voice. In a sense, when we left and I took on the duty I did, it was the best thing for me. I was able to relate to her better after that. These were the hardest things for me, managing the handmaidens and talking with my mother-in-law. The fact that I was a woman who was the secret secretary to an entire country, the fact that the court of the king relied on me to clean their dirty laundry and comfort their forbidden woes, that my husband had visions that led to spontaneously massive forms of architecture. These were very wearing, it is true, but they were nothing next to the simple woes all girls face in the transition from girlhood to womanhood. Yes, I was witness to a deep spiritual truth being realized. Yes, I saw a new epic take form intimately before my eyes. But when you are privy to such things, you find your perspective shifts. What stands out is the mundanity of it all, what is common. The true paths of life are simple, and walking them leads always to the same comforts and discomforts. Liberation is real, and it is a possibility, but it is a part of this simple, everyday pattern. I find when I look back, what I never said was how hard it was for me to do all that work while never taking credit. But I also wonder how much of his motivation I ever understood. In truth, I often viewed him through the eyes of a child. His flashes of inspiration were so sudden. His vision was so deep. It often felt as though one was witnessing a god. I think I never appreciated, and still do not fully, the extent to which he was making it up as he went along. He was taking each path that was meant for him, always fulfilling his line of duty. His vision informed him of his purpose from his already existing unity with God. I always attributed the deepest intentions to his actions, but this is probably inaccurate, and the forces that drove him were larger than any human intellect. It is hard, believe me, when you are in the presence of these forces. So perhaps he could not know the consequences of the message he inscribed within me, a message I impart in giving to you now, or beginning to give. I do not think any of us knew the consequences of what we were doing. We were at the epicenter of the invention of so many things that would reverberate through all the ages that followed. Not all of those things we invented were mere materials, and not all of their consequences were good. But who can say of these things? None of us know the consequences of our actions. As we used to say in the old days, there is a little truth in a good wine. Be happy, because nothing gold can stay. No form will last forever. The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. My country does not survive. All that is left are its bones, the skeletons of monuments, and cadavers with no one to leave them offerings. Thank God your kind has not desecrated my grave, and you will never find it, nor my husband's. Our country has passed away. There are only shadows left. And to all the great empires of the world, so too will be your fate. So drink wine, make merry, enjoy at least this time you have. It is the humblest service to God that you can offer.